Good evening. I think that we will begin, even though we may have a few latecomers. Welcome. My name is Margaret Happel-Perry. I'm the current president of Les Dames d'Escoffier, New York, a society that promotes careers of women in food, wine, nutrition, and the hospitality industry. Together with the New York University's Casa, Italiana, and its director, Stefano Albertini, we are delighted to present the first of a series on women's health initiatives. This evening is based on the nutrition sensibilities that we learn from the Mediterranean cultures and Italian-originated foods, and that includes wine, I am delighted to say. To introduce our panelists, first, Kerstin Hecker, founder of Indigo Muse, a health coaching business. Kerstin has a master's degree in business studies and is a certified health coach. She has a private nutrition consulting business and works with tomorrow's leader to produce nutritional life changes. Next, we have Michele Scicolone, an award-winning food writer and author of 20 cookbooks. All are Italian-inspired. We are in the right place. Her latest, the Italian vegetable cookbook, has everything from antipasti to desserts. And it was published in March of 2014. We also should note that Michele has had 2 books as the #1 on the bestseller cookbook list. And on a personal note, Michele is a member of Les Dames d'Escoffier and also is the current secretary of the organization. And I am incredibly indebted to her for her taking on that task. The last speaker will be Charles Scicolone. He is a wine writer, a culinary tour guide, and an educator. He has been a 6-time nominee for a James Beard Award. He is chair of the Wine Media Guild and a blog writer and an editor. And my memory of Charles goes back to when he established the Enoteca at Il Trulli on East 27th Street, which was just wonderful. We have Oscars to go to several of our members in the audience. First to Bay Wellington and Renee Martin, who are the chairs of the evening and have done much of the hard work. Other members that must have a lot of our praise. First, Kathy Fazzolari of Colucci and Sons, who has provided the food for the refreshments, along with another member, Ronnie Campbell, who couldn't be here. And at the end of the lecture part of the evening, there are wine and food refreshments up on the floor, on the ground floor. So, without any more delay, I am going to ask Kerstin to begin the evening. Thank you all for being here.
Good evening, everybody. The next slide, please. Awesome, good. So a few housekeeping things before we start. In front of you are a few pieces of paper. The top one should say Anchoring the Insight, and I have found it very helpful when I attend presentations that I can take some notes. I always hear useful things, and that may stick with me for about a few hours, and then afterwards I forget about it. So it really helps to write things down, maybe a few things that you find interesting and that you would want to look at again tomorrow, and or action steps. So we're here today to speak about food and mood. Some of you may have some insights already in how food affects your mood and vice versa, right? Sometimes we are hungry and then we feel also certain emotions combined with that. Why is food and mood so important? In today's world, we live in a rather stressful lifestyle. Living in New York, how many people here in the audience are living in Manhattan? So a lot. So coming out of the apartment and entering the New York City life is quite stressful for many of our nervous system, as it activates constantly our fight and flight response. The moment when we step out, maybe there's a taxi that stops us in the way, or maybe we need to yield to a bicycle driver. On top of that, we are rushing to the subway, trying to make certain meetings, etc. But we are very, very always on the run. And I found that image that really shows this quite well. The microphone is kind of interesting. Next slide, please. So who remembers America on the Run? It's actually a line for a big chain in the United States that has this as their slogan. It's Dunkin' Donut. Yeah. So this image actually really shows well how that stressful lifestyle really leads to mood and to certain crazy actions that we are doing. We see a person here maybe running for the subway. Another person on the top is running to meet a deadline. Another person here at the bottom is trying to re-energize, putting their feet in the pond and maybe drinking a cup of coffee to energize themselves. Constantly the time is ticking, and we are constantly rushing and running to make our meetings. Now, many of us may not necessarily sense that this is stress. Actually, many of my clients come in and say, "What, Kerstin, I'm not really stressed." But your nervous system actually does. There's something in your hypothalamus, it's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is something of the primal brain, and it's like a little merc-rat on the lookout. And it's activated every time when it perceives certain danger. And that danger could be running away from the tiger, as it used to be for the hunter and gatherer, but it could also be running to the next meeting. So it cannot really distinguish between the two of them. It cannot distinguish between you running to the subway, you running to the next meeting, you having a disagreement with somebody. Every time the amygdala gets activated, and that activates your fight and flight response. Why is that an issue? Because that activates the cortisol and adrenaline release in your body. And over time, it has been shown that this can really play havoc with your immune system and various other systems in your body. I came across a very interesting statistic that shows how this fast lifestyle really affects chronic illness in the United States. And this statistic here is comparing our likelihood of developing a heart disease. And let's see if it works now by magic. Woo, thank you. So we see here three different emotions. We have anxiety, anger, general distress, and smoking. And our likelihood of developing a heart disease. So as you can see, if we experience general distress, our likelihood of developing a heart disease is 170%, right? If we smoke, our likelihood of developing a heart disease is 180. Who would have thought that, right? Just 10% difference. Now, a few things on these other two emotions, anxiety and anger. We as a society are not necessarily, we have kind of divided emotions in some that are, we are comfortable to express, and others that we rather suppress or really don't show. And then due to upbringing and gender, we've also specified as which emotions are okay to express as a man and which emotions are okay to express as a woman. Now, anger is one of these emotions that comes usually as a human being's response to a boundary violation, right? let's say I'm coming into your space and you would say to me, I'm sorry, can you take a step back? And I don't listen to you, eventually you will raise your voice and I'm stepping back, right? So that is actually very, very healthy anger. Then there is another anger, and that anger is an anger that is based on something that may have happened earlier in our life that we may not necessarily realize what it is. It could have even been happening earlier in the day, where we then respond to a situation with anger. But the reaction to the event is actually in proportion to what the event is given credit to. And in that case, it's really an anger that is based on something that is much deeper. In any case, most of it are very unaware of these processes that are happening in the body and are suppressing it. Especially women, it's much more regarded for men to easier express their anger. Women are more allowed to express their sadness and vice versa. So we all have certain emotions that we are suppressing. Now anxiety, right? Anxiety is another one of these emotions. Anxiety, when I am anxious, right? Am I in the past, am I in the present, or am I in the future? I'm in the future, right? And what happens with my energy? Is it like in my body, does it go up, or where is my energy when I'm anxious? It's up, right? So when I'm basically not grounded, not in my body, and my energy is up, now I have anxiety. Maybe I have anxiety about public speaking, right? Or I have an anxiety about meeting my boyfriend's parents, or I have an anxiety about making it to my flight. How much do you think is my response to any signals that my body is giving me? Do you think I'm tuned into my body or not? No. Okay. So in today's world, we have so many people who have anxiety disorders and or who are experiencing anxiety and depression. And this really makes us very, very disconnected from our body. So this being a core emotion as being suppressed, it really helps to uncover what the origin is and actually process it and embody it. I'm waiting for a few people to sit down. So why am I here and speaking about health and nutrition and well-being? I came to the United States at the age of 23. I was working for a big company, for the chairman of that company, and I was the only assistant for him. Prior to me, he had 2 people. And I'm a person who is very well at multitasking, right? So I was running this gentleman's schedule. I had short, brief breaks for lunch, but basically his life was my life. And you know it with a lot of these people who are rather influential, they meet influential other people. And so depending on who would show up the next day, I would have to triple check whether everything is correct, whether the car was picking him up there, or the food was ready, or this was ready, and constantly things would go wrong, right? So I would go home at night, and I was already in my mind imagining what could go wrong the next day, even though I have checked up everything the day before. So after a while, I could really sense like that all of this constant working and checking up, multitasking started to leave a toll like on my body, and it showed up initially as sinus infections, respiratory infections. Maybe some of you in the audience have also respiratory or sinus infection. And it got so bad eventually that I had to take antibiotics about 5 times a year. Eventually these antibiotics would not work anymore. And I was put on steroids. And for anybody who's ever had steroids in their life, that's something that's rather unpleasant, as it makes you feel as if you just had 25 cups of coffee in one go. And then after that, it drops you equally down. And if you never had depression, you know what depression is in the moment you take steroids. Because first you have this jolt, and then you have this low. And I decided, okay, I gotta do really something about this. And I saw an integrative physician, Dr. Frank Lipman. He was rather marvelous. I was scheduled for a sinus surgery, and he said, Kerstin, before you do anything, before you let anybody interfere in your body, before you let anybody cut anything out or alter anything in your nose, you have to look at every option there is available that you can do in yourself, at nutrition, at stress levels, at everything. And so that's when I started to learn more about nutrition and about food, right? So I took out a lot of things that were actually, I was observing my body, what creates these sinus flares, and I was taking out these foods that were creating it in the first place. Now we learn, right? So it started out with me in nutrition, but I still, then I ate healthy and I was working busily, and I thought, okay, now I'm all set, right? Because I'm eating good and I can now work and go back to that kind of lifestyle. But about 2 years later then, I was working hard again, and I had this beautiful weekend with a friend of mine in Southampton, and we were supposed to spend this day on the beach, and here I am with a kidney infection in Southampton Hospital, emergency room, right? So the nurse stood in front of me, and she probably looked like my mother or somebody else, and she stood in front of me with a finger, I remember very well, and she said, "Kerstin, how is it possible that you didn't feel that you have a kidney infection, right? This is something you feel. You have pains in your bodies. There are certain symptoms that actually happen when you have a kidney infection. How is it possible that you didn't feel any of this?" And of course, the first reaction is, right, I don't know. But truth to be told, I did know. So checking in with myself, I really realized that I was totally out of touch with my body, full stop. I was not really truly listening to its signals, right? Because of my busy schedule, that was my choice, right? And also my busy spare time activities, I was overwhelming myself, and I was not listening and paying attention to my body. I put the task that I was doing and my value that was attached to, me working and being successful over those needs of my body. And that was not a good decision. And I finally learned that lesson there. I found a cute, quirky graphic that symbolizes that very well. Next slide, if possible. Here we go. How it works again. I don't know if anybody of you remember a movie. When I grew up, there was a movie, it's called Herbie the Love Bug. And there is this final scene of Herbie where Herbie is about to make it over the finish line, and it divides, in two pieces, right? The back piece and the front piece. And this was kind of like, in some ways, a way I wanted to show to you how it is when we separate, right? When our mind is always 30 steps or even more, like light years ahead of our body, and how you could actually already sense in the case of anxiety how detached you are from your body and its emotions and from any sensation that really happens inside of your body. And that for me was really a big aha moment. Next slide. Okay. So why am I sharing all of this with you? Because much of the stress and disconnectedness has to do with the issues that we have today with our health system, right? With the chronic illnesses that we have in the United States. Currently, about 133 million have at least one or multiple chronic illnesses in the United States. That's about 48%. And the shocking part is, as all of these chronic illnesses cost 17.9% of the gross domestic product, which is $3 trillion, right? These people are really only getting 56% of the healthcare service that they should be getting, right? And this is 2005. You can imagine, by the time I am old, I'm not sure if I'm going to see any healthcare services here and what will happen to our healthcare system by then. But some of the issues that we have, and we already talked about, the big chronic illnesses are heart disease here. About 83 million of people have heart disease. Again, heart disease, right? Heart disease also has to do with hypertension. The word itself really already says what goes on in heart disease. Hypertension, right? somehow we've only looked at the aspect of the nutrition. We have looked at they have a poor diet, but who really looks at stress and suppressed stress? The word says it, hypertension. Then asthma. What is asthma? Right? It's a restriction of your airwaves. And again, what is that? If something is constricted, it's a form of stress again, right, in the body. Currently, 26 million people are suffering of asthma, especially 7.1 million children, which is very sad, and they're missing about 11 million school days. So asthma directly affects a child's upbringing and their education. Then the third part, diabetes. Currently about 29 million of us have diabetes. Of those, 71% also had high blood pressure and also had high cholesterol. So these two usually go hand in hand, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Currently, 17% of children are obese. I have done this talk in 2012, and it was around 11%, I believe. So just in these 2 years, it has gone up to 17%, and 35% of adults are obese. Then depression and anxiety. Again, the word depression, what does it say? To depress, right? We are suppressing certain emotion. Again, there is a link to stress in depression. Here we have 40 million people with depression, about $200,000 million lost in work days, and 44 billion in productivity. So economically, this is really something that eventually is going to bite the United States, and also any employer. Right? If I have employees who are constantly sick because they're suffering on one of these illnesses, it affects my bottom line. So it's really important as an employer also to pay attention and make sure that my employees have good health care system, that they have time off, that maybe I even incentivize them in giving them healthy food and healthy food options, educate them in stress, because in the end, we live in such a competitive environment, right? How am I better in comparison to my competition? I need to really have happier and healthier employees. So that is to that. Next slide. So what are the contributors to negative mood and illness? So we already talked about the first one, that's stress, and that is physical stress as well as emotional stress on the body. The second one are chemicals. Many of us are surrounded by them in our household, right? There's actually been lots of literature out there, again, from Frank Lipman, who says that there are more chemicals in our house than there are in front of our door, right? In our cosmetics, right? And then, of course, the third contributor is the food. So it's the quality of the food, it's the allergens in the food, and the toxins in the food. Let's talk again about the stress cycle. So what happens inside of the body when I feel stress? So this can be general distress, or it can be anything else that activates that fight and flight response or my adrenals. So when I am stressed, my body starts, or better the adrenals, which are sitting about right here, to release cortisol and adrenaline, right? So that makes us ready to fight and to flight. And in the moment when our body releases adrenaline, that really sends all of our energy to our hands and to our legs. So we become like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, like Superman, to like fight and flight. In that moment, all energy is taken away from digestion, from our brain, from cell reparation, from all of these bodily processes that we really need to make our body work, right? So if I am in constant stress, my body's resources are constantly given to my muscles, and always taken away from the inside of myself. Also, and the most important part is the clarity of thinking, right? So when I'm stressed out, it's not necessarily that I'm making the smartest decision or could, win a Nobel Prize in physics at that moment, most likely. So when I'm stressed, what happens also is that the immune system is suppressed, because in the moment when I need to flee, my immune response doesn't need to be active, right? Because I need to fight and flight, so all energy really needs to go to my extremities in that moment. And over time, that weakens the heart. Over time, we get fatigued. And then we crave sugar. And so then the cycle continues and continues, right? When we crave sugar again, eventually we feel stressed, and so we repeat this over and over again. Now, chemicals, that was the second point. Chemicals are things that we really cannot see, right? They're invisible. Many times we can't smell them. But they're all around in our environment, and they've been shown to cause neurological problems with children as well as with adults. Currently, there are about 80,000 chemicals on the market. Only 200 of them have been tested, and only 5 of them have been partially regulated. Now, anybody who wants to bring a food product to the United States knows the incredible testing that goes under when you want to import anything into the United States. But here we are, constantly surrounded by chemicals in our environment, and the Environmental Protection Group or agency has only regulated 5. So it's really in our own responsibility to watch out and see what is in the products and to read the labels, whether it's on the skincare, whether it's really doing the check when we move into a new apartment and really see, is there anything that is funny in here? Does anything smell here? What is the building material made of? What are the toys that our children play with? What are these things made of? One example of how these chemicals can actually affect us is lead, right? So lead has been researched and then taken out of petrol because precisely they've shown reduced IQ in children or in people born between 1960 and 1980. BPA has been around for quite a while, and we're talking now about many people using BPA-free products. Why is that? BPA is in the majority of plastic products, plastic bottles, it's in your cellophane wrap, anything basically that's plastic is BPA. Why is that an issue? Well, first off, it's a plastic, right? So it's a chemical. And even though you are buying a plastic bottle in the supermarket, and some of you may have actually had this experience, right? If this plastic bottle gets hot, right, and you drink out of it, what does the water taste like? Chemicals. So the chemicals, when it gets heated, actually leach into the water. How do you don't know this, maybe now they cool down that water bottle and you get it, but you don't know if there are chemicals in the water, but you can, that's why it's so important that our senses are sharp and that we're not in la-la land or anxiety land, so when we taste the water and something tastes funny, to not drink that kind of water. But the biggest thing with BPA, and it's in plastic and canned food, is the issue with estrogen. And why is estrogen an issue, right? BPA mimics the hormone estrogen, and in women it has been shown that it can contribute to breast cancer and various other cancers. And it can also add issues in that department for men as well. So it's very important that we pay attention to not drinking out of plastic bottles, to drink out of glass, right? Or to bring like a flask that is out of metal, aluminum maybe. So we are not surrounded by all of this plastic and the cellophane. And as a consumer, we really are so incredibly powerful because what we purchase, the store stock. Across from my street is a Dwayne Reed. And Dwayne Reed now carries raw coconut water. I mean, I would have never even thought, not even like the majority of regular stores carry raw coconut water. They also carry my chia pot. I can buy it now at Dwayne Reed. I mean, if Dwayne Reed is already having this in New York City, that really shows how many consumers want this, and they must do their research because their supply is based on demand, right? The other thing is asbestos. You may have seen a few big rats standing in front of the buildings in New York where employees are complaining about bad conditions with their employer and asbestos being in the building. Why is that an issue? Asbestos affects our lungs and our respiratory system, and we don't want to be close to it. Other chemicals, again, are in our household in our drinking water and in our in various different cosmetics. So why is that important? A friend of mine takes hormone replacement products as creams, right? And the cream is actually given, and you put it right here onto your hand, right? And it directly accesses your bloodstream. So if the cream can access the bloodstream and give me more estrogen or progesterone, what do you think Preel is doing that I'm using for my household products? Or the skincare product that I'm using, or the Pantenes that I'm using, where are those going? They're also going right into my skin. So it's really something to pay attention to, and limit the use of these chemicals, especially as we have a choice in today's environment. There's so many other products out there. And you have to see that all of these things are stacking, right? So we have the stress, now we have the chemicals, then we also may not have the best food. So we're adding a little bit more by more load on our body. The chemicals, just to show you how it's given even to the infant directly through the umbilical cord of the mother. A newborn has been shown with 287 chemicals in their body. Hasn't even yet seen the light of day. The next slide, please. So coming to food. Now, for our body to deal with these chemicals and to deal with the stress, we need to have a really healthy immune system and a really healthy body. And our body needs nutrients, right? And it needs food that is rich in nutrients, rich in minerals. And if we look to the right, it's your right, exactly. Most of the foods there, how much nutritional value do they have? How much vegetables do you see on there? How much processed food do you see on there? Probably how many emulsifiers are used, maybe how much food coloring is used. How much genetically modified food is in there. So today, talking about livestock, 85% of our antibiotics that are sold in the United States, of the entire percentage of manufactured antibiotics, are given to the livestock. 85%. And that with the explanation that because of the possibility of them catching an illness, which if any of you have seen any of the conditions that these animals are in, are obviously created also through the way that these animals are kept, are the reason why they're actually allowed to keep these antibiotics in these animals. Now, when we are eating the livestock, right, where do the antibiotics go? So when I was not able anymore when my body didn't really function anymore on antibiotics, obviously one part was my own issue because I was taking them that often. But there are also many cases in people where antibiotics simply don't work because if they're on a diet that is very high in processed food and processed livestock, they're already ingesting so many antibiotics that in the end these antibiotics don't work anymore when you really need them. Genetically modified food, 95% of all conventional food is genetically modified. Currently, the United States has not banned genetically modified food. It doesn't even require labeling. There are some states in the United States, one is Vermont, one is California, New York is looking at a bill of possibly banning some substances of genetically modified food. Countries that have stepped forward and banned production as well as selling of genetically modified food is Saudi Arabia as a country. Italy has mostly banned genetically modified food. Germany too. So that means these countries have not only, they have banned it, there is no food in that environment that we can even have that issue, of genetically modified food. Many people ask me what are the issues with genetically modified food. There are two from the consumer perspective I see, and the first one is I as a consumer want to know if I'm buying something that has genetically modified food in. And I feel misled if I'm not being told that there is genetically modified food in there. It's just like an ingredient list in a way, right? And the third thing is that they've already found in children birth defects and various other issues related to genetically modified food. So it's rather a big issue, and there are many people, and you're reading about it in the media. So the second point is sugar. And that has become a big headline now, right? It's not anymore fat, now it's sugar. So for a while, they had us on that wagon of the low fat and high sugar. Now we are not allowed to have sugar anymore. How is that to be put into perspective? The problem with sugar is that most of it is really high fructose corn syrup and or processed sugar. And that, as we will talk about in a minute, has a different effect than if we eat fruit or vegetables or other products that contain fiber in it. It again activates the stress response and various other issues in our body. And the third thing in food is, of course, the nutritional value that we already looked at. So it's the low quality and the nutrient-deprived food that we have here in the United States. The next slide, please. So sugar consumption in the United States. Oops, okay. Does anybody know a good joke? Yeah, thank you. So sugar consumption in the United States. Please take a seat and come in. So currently in the United States, the typical American eats 72 pounds of sugar. Right? I wish I would have like a little wagon to roll that in here, because visually that is probably quite a lot of sugar. That is 22.2 teaspoons of sugar a day. Right? The Center of Disease Control has said that the recommended dose is really 9 teaspoons of sugar for men and 6 teaspoons for women. Now, there are many sugars that are hidden, and don't think that just because it's organic that there's no sugar in it. There still can be sugar in it, right? So here we have the soda, and if I am a woman or a man and I'm drinking a soda, I already have 8 teaspoons of sugar, right? Tomato sauce, 6 teaspoons of sugar. Salad dressing, 2 teaspoons of sugar. The Healthy Health Bar has 3 teaspoons of sugar. Dried fruit has 2 teaspoons of sugar, and frozen food has 4 teaspoons of sugar. 1 teaspoon is 4 grams. And I brought some, I love looking through the garbage. So I have brought a frozen meal with me here. It's a healthy choice meal, right? And this healthy choice meal has 29 grams of sugar in it. And it has 190 milligrams of sodium and various other salts in here. So sodium is put into these processed meals to keep their shelf life long. Of course, not our shelf life, right? Because that really doesn't matter. Then here I have something else. It's supposedly, it looks rather healthy, right? It's Greek, it has honey in it, whole grains. It at least tells me it has whole grains in it. But then if I really take a look and read the label, I see that it's really whole grain flakes with a tiny bit of sugar, and then added on the sugar is more sugar through corn syrup, more sugar, and more sugar. And yeah, canola, which is one of the most highest genetically modified food. Yeah, so a colleague of mine calls these kind of cereals a box of inflammation, which it probably is. Then almond milk, right? We all think almond milk is so healthy, and probably the almond milk that doesn't have chocolate in it is healthy, but this one has chocolate in it, right? So this is chocolate almond milk, 1 serving, 27 grams of sugar. What else do I have here? Okay, this is that, right? So it's really important, as I said, to read the labels, and they're in the process actually of redesigning the labels. Because if you actually look, I mean, I can't even read this. Can you read this? I mean, you really needed binoculars to really read this, what's here on the back of the packaging. So it's important to read what is on here, not just the ingredients that says vitamin A, vitamin C, but see how much fat, how much sugar is in there, and then read the ingredient list, how much chemicals is in there. The next slide, please. Now, what happens to us when we eat sugar? Right? And here we're talking about glucose. Glucose meaning white powdered sugar that is also in so many products. So when I eat sugar, my blood glucose rises above normal within 10 to 15 minutes. Now, my body needs to neutralize this blood glucose, but because my pH value needs to constantly be at a steady base that's around 6.8 to 7%. 7. And so the pancreas starts to pump insulin to offset that, right? Now, right afterwards, we are experiencing a dramatic drop in blood sugar within 20 to 40 minutes. And that's kind of like, I always call it the sugar boogie woogie, you know, like when you eat sugar and then you have lots of energy and like 20 minutes later, you feel like you need to take a big nap, like a couch potato. So in that moment when you don't have the opportunity to take a nap because you're at work, here we go. Let's get some coffee. Let's get some sugar. Let's get anything that has fast energy so I can replenish myself. So the more often we do that, the more problematic this becomes because a second process is actually happening at the same time. And that is that sugar stimulates the dopamine response in the brain. And they have done a test with mice in Bordeaux in 1995 where they were giving mice a choice between cocaine, note, also a white powder, and sugar, another white powder. And they offered them like a Pavlovian, example, which one do you want to eat? And the mouse, in every case, always chose the sugar. They've now actually found that when you eat sugar, not only does one region in cocaine and these addictive substances, one region in the brain lights up. If you eat sugar, your brain lights up like a pinball machine. So the more sugar you eat, the more sugar your body wants. It's highly, highly addictive. And that was already found out in the 17th century because sugar came to the United States via Europe from France, and in France, sugar was treated as crack. So they called sugar crack, and they said, wow, what an incredible product. If we take this, we get a high, kind of can see. And you can also see how we as human beings want maybe that high, right? Because it also helps us to disconnect even further, but also we get this high. And the manufacturers thought, what a great product, right? It makes people dependent on our Happy Meal, on our nachos, on our whatever we want to eat. We have a dependent consumer now because we're activating this dopamine response and they will constantly eat our food. So again, it's really in our own initiative to really make sure that we pay attention to what has food in it, sugar in it. Now, the more sugar we eat, and we're talking again about glucose, the less insulin reservoir our body has. And why does that matter? Because our blood cannot deal with the glucose, our body needs to convert these molecules. And what does it do? It turns it into triglycerides. So sugar equals high cholesterol. So you may drink a low-calorie soda thinking that here I am only having 0 calories, but your body and the effect of it is not really 0 calories. And next slide, please. Now, how is that different? What is better than eating just white carbs, processed sugars? Whole wheat, I always say the holy grail. And with that, I mean, it could be brown rice, it could be really whole grain, not like whole grains, confusing with whole grains on this packaging here, that was kind of wheat powder, but really fermented whole grain bread, quinoa, kamut, dark grains where there's a shell actually around the main grain. So when we eat whole grains, our blood sugar rises slowly within the next 4 hours, and the insulin in response to that also is released slowly. Hence, we don't have that drop in energy going back and forth all day. I've also found that it's really, really important to add whole grains to your breakfast. Your brain in the morning is really depleted of sugars in the morning, so it's highly important to add some whole grains into your diet. So for example, a rice quinoa, a kamut quinoa, or like a whole wheat, sprouted wheat toast with some almond butter on it to really replenish the reservoirs of our brain. And when we eat actually whole grains in the morning, most of the people have no cravings for sugar or so in the afternoon. It really makes a difference when we eat certain foods and just even switching them around. Now we have another thing here, which is fruit. And next slide, please. So why is fruit different and vegetables different than sugar? Because fruits and vegetables have something in it that's called fructose. And fructose is not equal to glucose because it needs to be converted by our liver. Our liver converts fructose into glucose. And then, again, we have a gradual release of insulin. And that is due to the fiber in the fruits and the vegetables, right? The fiber slows down, just like in the whole grain, the absorption of the sugar that is in the fruit and the vegetable. Now, other forms of fructose that have become so popular in today's world, and that is high fructose corn syrup, agave, or any other powdered sugar that is made out of fructose, is lacking that fiber, right? So in essence, we have again the same issue that we had with the sugar, but now added to it the liver. The liver is responsible for cleaning up our system, and now is also overburdened with converting these fructoses into glucoses. And again, when it doesn't have enough insulin, again, it needs to turn around these molecules into triglycerides, and that's why we get fatty liver, etc. It's from people having too much fructose in their diet, most of the time processed. Now, one thing that has become very popular is juicing, right? Juicing. And in the case of juicing, what happens, if you are having a juice, it really depends on the amount of vegetables to juice first, vegetables to fruit, right? The more vegetables you have, hopefully, especially green vegetables, the less sugar is in there. But the majority of juices look very different. They have very high amounts of sugar in it. And the moment you juice something, you're taking the fiber out, or the majority of the fiber. So you have another big hit of sugar in your system. So it just because I'm juicing doesn't mean it's healthier. So another thing that has become more popular in comparison to that is actually something to create yourself a smoothie and to use something like a Vitamix, where you would use the entire fruit, the entire vegetable, and so your body has the fiber in it and can slower absorb it. Nutritional value, thank you. So this shows the current nutritional value of food in the United States in calories. So currently, 63% of all of our calories in the United States, and this is again average, done by the USDA Economic Research in 2009, is in processed food. It's added fats, oils, sugars, and refined grains. 25% is animal foods, 6% is processed plant food, and only 6% is fresh plant food from fruits and vegetables. Of those 6%, the half of it goes to potatoes. To show you this, it's great to see an example of a family and what their shopping basket looks like for 1 week. Next slide, please. So this was done by Peter Menzel and Faith Dalucia, and they traveled around the world and created their first book, which was called Hungry Planet, What We Eat, and they photographed family and their shopping basket for 1 week. And here we have the United States, the Craven family, They're spending $160 a week, and we see what they're eating. We have a little bit vegetables. There are 3 broccoli in the front. We have some frozen peas over there, but lots of pizza, lots of vanilla waffles, some bananas in the back, Coca-Cola, and so forth. And of course, our cereal there. Now, another family, to just show, the United States is a huge country, and you may say because of the income constraints, possibly this family was having this kind of food. But here we have a family that spends $340, and their favorite foods are spaghetti, potatoes, and sesame chicken. Yet, if we really look at their table, we see lots of hamburgers, French fries, also some potato chips, most processed. We see and spot a little bit grapes over there, right? Can anybody spot vegetables on this? Ah, yeah, some canned food in the back, right? Tomatoes, yeah. Some tomatoes, yeah. But this is for 1 week. It's not for 1 day. So the ideal ratio should really be 60% plant food, and yeah. Now coming to the Mediterranean diet, an Italian family here. This is a family in Sicily. They're spending $260. It's the Manso family. And you can already see how much more fresh food is on that table, right? And they also eat bread. And then also you see the fresh meat, right? They probably are going to a butcher to get fresh meat, so there's no processed food in that aspect. So it's a very different table. Now they did this. They went back again and did more research on individuals, right? So not to put everybody in the United States over one comb. They've looked at people who are surfers. They looked at people who are astronauts. They looked at people who are farmers and what are they eating in daily life, right? Because your own experience, your own education, and what you know about food and how close you are to food shapes what you're eating, a fisherman. And there's another book that came out, and it's called What I Eat. The photos are available online. I highly recommend taking a peek at it. They've traveled all around the world, and it really tells a beautiful story, and in many ways a picture says quite a lot here, right? Next slide, please. So what can we do, right? What can we do to shield ourselves off from the pesticides, and what can we do to eat healthier, right? First of all, there are 2 lists that have been created. One is called the Dirty Dozen, the other one is called the Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen is a list of foods that are loaded with pesticides. It's usually foods that have very, very thin skin. And it's your fruits, your berries, your salads, your apples. All of these foods don't only have pesticides on the outside because of the chemicals, but already the seed itself has chemicals in it, because when it's in the soil, it's most likely to receive and most vulnerable. Then there's another list, you can also look it up, it's called the Clean 15. Next slide, please. And these are the foods, if you have those in your diet, you're eliminating 92%. If you're sticking to these foods as only domestic, then you're eliminating basically 92% of all pesticides. And again, the second one, sweet corn, most of it is genetically modified. So this list means that it has less pesticide, but it doesn't mean that it's not genetically modified, right? So what is better than that? It's eating organic. And can I have the next slide, please? I like this. So organic, right? Organic is not natural. It's also not called natural ingredients. If I want to know if something is organic, on the back of the label it says USDA organic, right? That's the only way I'm going to know it's organic. So here a woman did a lovely research. This was a doctorate, part of a doctorate dissertation at Johns Hopkins University. And she was comparing mineral content of organic crop and conventional crop. And you can see this is like the increase in comparison. So right, the amount of iodine, 500%. Yeah, 500% iodine content. Magnesium, 30%. Psyllium, 90%, no, actually 372%. So it's really beneficial to eat organic foods because you're getting many more minerals, and these minerals are responsible for building your neurotransmitters and other things in your body. Next slide, please. So not only can you see the energy of the food when you look at it and when you smell it, but actually they did something, it's called Kirlian photography. And Kirlian photography can show the energy of food by attaching an electrode to it. On the left, you see the organic tomato. On the right, the conventional tomato. Next slide, please. Here we have an organic potato versus a French fry. Beautiful, right? And in front of you on that sheet with the offer, there's actually cacao. And you can see how that looks with Kirlian photography. Next slide, please. So why is all of this important? It's because our body needs to function. And our body needs to function, and it needs nutrients, in particular for the building blocks of neurotransmitters. These are directly related to the way we function and if we crave food or don't crave food and how our mood is. Our nervous system is wired in a way that our nerve cells are not attached to each other. So it needs little messenger cells, and those messenger cells are called neurotransmitters. And those messenger cells have to jump from cell to cell, from nerve cell to nerve cell to relate the information. If we don't have enough building blocks, meaning nutrients and minerals, our body cannot build these neurotransmitters. Hence, we get certain mood disorders. So here are 4 neurotransmitters that are rather important for the food-mood connection. The first one is GABA. GABA is a natural tranquilizer. We know that we are low in GABA if we are stressed and burned out a lot and if we crave carbs and alcohol. GABA supporting foods are spinach, almonds, halibuts, and whole grain. Okay. Then the second one is serotonin. Serotonin is a natural antidepressant. It really helps us to stay upbeat and have constant good energy. If we have depression, anxiety, and worry, there's a huge likelihood that we are low in serotonin, right? And we are craving usually foods in the afternoon and in the evening. The third one is this is a great word, catecholamines, which are the natural stimulants, and we already talked about some of them. One is dopamine, norepinephrine, and adrenaline. And those are actually responsible for our focus and for our energy. When we have a lack of energy, we are craving certain foods again that give us this energy. The fourth one is endorphins. And endorphins, as some of you may have already experienced, we feel in response to exercising, for example, or if we are running, right? It's a natural painkiller. And if we don't have enough endorphins in our system, we are sensitive and we cry easy and so forth. And in food, we usually crave numbing treats. Next slide, please. I created a little handout for you that's in front of you. And that handout shows how you can boost your food with particular smart foods. These foods are helping to aid all of these neurotransmitters in your system to increase them, right? So we have spinach here, we have Swiss chard here, which has folate in it. They actually did studies with people who had depression, and they gave them 4 cups of spinach, and they showed improvement after that, which is quite amazing, right? We have citrus fruits and vitamin C, which is really important in how we can handle stress. I work with many people who are in the fashion industry and who are working for fashion shows, and when they have a fashion show coming up, they're drinking the entire day orange juice. Somehow it got around that orange juice is something that is helpful. And interestingly, science proves that orange juice actually has an ingredient in it, the vitamin C, if it's fresh pressed, that really helps us to cope stress. All of these foods, as we can see, most of them are also available in the Mediterranean diet, right? We have olive oil, we have citrus fruits, we have halibuts, walnuts, right? Good for the brain. And many times the food itself is kind of like the key to what it does for the body. So here the walnut really looks like the brain, right? Importance also, I always have to speak about eggs. Choline is very important because we don't really get choline from any other source. And there's a huge misconception in thinking that cholesterol creates cholesterol. It isn't so. And having heard this presentation today, you know what creates cholesterol, right? It's sugar. So it boosts your brain function, and you cannot get it in any other shape or form. So if you can eat eggs, have an egg. Then chocolate. I just briefly want to talk about my favorite superfood. Chocolate is one of the highest antioxidants on the planet. And I've learned from David Wolfe that if you combine chocolate with berries, you're creating the most potent antioxidant you can possibly have. It increases the fold of antioxidant in your system ×3. But the chocolate needs to be raw, and it cannot have milk in it, because in that moment the effects of the chocolate are buffered. There's tons of raw chocolate out today. It's really incredible chocolate. It's rather smooth. It almost tastes like milk chocolate. Chocolate is actually an adaptogen, which means it transfers and helps to bring nutrients into your cells. So today, many chocolates are created with reishi mushrooms, with maca, and with all these ingredients, and it's almost medicine, right? So what can you do? I work with people usually in 3 months commitments, but I created a special program today for all the people here in the room, which is a 21-day vital reboot. And except what we talked about, of course, every person is an individual. As a holistic health coach, we look at the whole human being, meaning every person is different. Your metabolism is different, your stressors are different, your heritage is different, and everybody really needs personal attention. Hence, we really don't fit over this one shoe fits everybody approach. Hence, many diets don't work, right? Because they have been created by people for whom it worked, and now we are trying to mass market them to people who are all individuals. So I have a little offer sheet there. You can read through it. I'm offering a $200 discount of 2 health coaching sessions. Should you be interested, please fill it out and give it back to me. I want to thank you very much for your attention. I'm really grateful for your time, and I want to give the microphone now to Michele.
Microphone on? Great. Everything you see, I owe to spaghetti. It's a quote that's often been attributed to Sophia Loren. I'm not sure if she really said it or not, but I think it's still a great way to illustrate the importance of food to people in the Mediterranean, especially to Italians. What it says to me is that food, not just any food, but something delicious and enjoyable, has the power to give us good looks, good health, and even success. Many children are taught to think this way from an early age. In Italian and French schools, children sit down with their teachers at lunchtime, and they sit at a table set with napkins and cutlery. A typical lunch in an Italian school might start with a small amount of pasta with tomato sauce and basil, followed by a frittata and a green salad, and then it finishes up with some fresh fruit for dessert. I know we're probably all hungry, and that sounds pretty appealing to me. In French schools, snacking is not permitted. They don't have vending machines. They don't have soda pop or soft drinks for the children. The children are not allowed to snack during the day. For the French, the social aspect of a meal is a very important part of a child's education. They call the act of sitting down at the table and sharing conversation, sharing a meal, making friends, discussing current events, commensality, and this is an important thing for children to learn. especially in France, where 80% of the meals are taken with other people. In fact, the French government mandates that the school lunch period should be 30 minutes long. That's quite a lot of time spent at the table for a young child, but it pays off in their interest and appreciation of the food that they're served. One American mom who was living abroad was amazed to find that her kid would have for lunch things like oxtail soup, or he would eat a fennel salad, and she asked him some questions. How is it? You know, where did you learn to appreciate that? Did you enjoy it? And the kid said, well, I don't really know if I liked it or not, but all my friends were eating it, so he obviously didn't want to be the only one to not to be complaining and not sharing the meal, because he was learning good table manners. I think that's something that is very important and something that we really need to focus more on today. Lunch for French kids will often start with a vegetable course, maybe a carrot salad or a beet salad, because the French know that a hungry kid is more likely to eat their vegetables than one who has already had the protein part of his meal. And I think this is an excellent way for all of us to eat. Start with a vegetable. The French children often have 4 courses. After they've had their vegetable, they'll have a fish or a small portion of meat or an egg dish, and then they'll have a piece of real cheese, not processed cheese food, but the real thing, a small amount, some fruit, and once a week or so, they do have a treat, and they have sweet like ice cream or a small piece of cake. But notice that I'm not talking about chicken nuggets or hot dogs or stuff like that. There's no children's food menu. Same thing in restaurants. You'll find that all the time. The children will eat the same thing that the adults are eating. Lunches are locally controlled, and most of the ingredients are organic. They try to use organic ingredients in the children's meals. The cost of this kind of a meal is shared by the children's families and the local school district. Families pay what they can afford. Now, I know what you're thinking, that probably wouldn't work so well here. We don't have the homogeneous society that you're more likely to find in a French school. And even there, you'll see that a lot of parents, not everyone agrees with this way of eating, and they feel maybe it's too rigid, maybe they have some other ideas on how their children should be fed. But still, I think that sometimes here in America, we've gone a little bit too far in the opposite direction. We all want to have it our way, to take a line from our friends at McDonald's. Americans want to eat what they want to eat when they want, they'll eat in the subway, they'll eat in their cars. Very few people sit down and have a meal together on a regular basis. And so we've lost that socializing aspect of eating a meal, because it's not just about the nutrients, which obviously are essential, but there's so much more that comes with the intake of food. Things, of course, are changing in traditional cultures as well. We talk about not giving kids soda pop, but as you saw, even the Italian family, did you see those great big bottles lined up back there? It used to be that soda was a treat. You know, kids would have it maybe once a week or occasionally when they went to the pizzeria. But nowadays, it's become more common. And like many sweets, junk food is everywhere and very heavily advertised, as we know. It's hard to resist. And it's often marketed to European people as healthy or traditional. And take Nutella, for example. I don't know, I know when I was growing up, we barely knew what Nutella was. I only saw it as a product that they had in Italy once I started traveling to Italy. And, but now in the past 10 years ago or so, it's become very, very popular here in this country. At first, you may remember that it was marketed as a nutritious food, and there was the suggestion that you're doing the right thing by your children if you give them Nutella as a snack. But some American consumers objected to that, and they raised their objections, and eventually they sued the company that makes and distributes Nutella, and they had to pay a great big fine. Yet, despite that, they still market Nutella with this suggestion that it's nutritious in European countries. And one nutritionist explained it to me. I really wasn't quite sure, but what she said was that Europeans have developed food cultures that include the good with the bad. And so they are less fearful of foods we might deem dangerous. I think we're a little less trusting, perhaps, as when it comes to food, because we've seen so many bad things, as Kerstin pointed out. The pleasure of food to the Europeans has always been part of the nurturing quality, and this has left them vulnerable to advertising that portrays junk food as wholesome family food and sweet drinks as something to make the little ones happy. So, unfortunately, the European people have accepted this line. But I think that we still have a lot that we can learn from the traditional European family, especially the Italians and the French that I'm most familiar with. Many of them still hold firmly to their traditions. In fact, there's even some evidence that Italians are sort of going back in this very bad economy, because, you know, in Italy they've been suffering for a long time with the economy, and many people have been out of work, and there's a lot of issues relating to recession. But a lot of Italians have gone back to shopping not in the supermarket full of processed food, but shopping at, taking the trouble to find a farmer's market. And you see more farmer's markets sprouting up. And even I've read that there's a trend for Italians to, because they can't afford vacations like they once did, but to rent little plots of land in the countryside where they can then grow their own produce and bring their families for a day in the country, get some fresh air, relax, get away from the hustle and bustle in the city. So those are all very good trends as far as going back to the traditions and holding on to the traditions are concerned. It reminds me of when I was growing up in Brooklyn in an Italian-American household, and even though we had just a tiny little backyard in our house, my parents always kept part of it for fruits and vegetables that they would grow themselves. Part of it was for fun. It wasn't that it was necessary for us to grow the melons or tomatoes or basil that we had there. But it was something that we kids learned to love, and we looked forward to it. We couldn't wait for those tomatoes to be ripe, and nobody had to hide our fruits and vegetables in the form of a cookie or something like that. You know, it's done so much here. It was something that we enjoyed eating, and we ate with great relish. And really that's what made me write my new book, the Italian Vegetable Cookbook, which some of you may have seen up front, because these are the recipes that I grew up with. They're traditional foods. They're things that are very easy to prepare. They're very widely appealing, and that's the great thing about Italian food, is that it's easy to prepare. The ingredients are widely available, and they're something that everyone seems to find acceptable in their excellence and simplicity. I think that we're going in the right direction too. Whenever I go to the green market nowadays, I see people, the groups of children, school children, there to learn about fruits and vegetables and produce, and they're talking to the farmers, and they're excitedly making lists of the vegetables they're seeing and talking about it amongst themselves. I think that we're going in the right direction too, as far as that's concerned, in getting kids involved in healthy eating and in eating good and natural food as soon as we possibly can. So I do have hope. And harking back to my childhood, even today, I live on the 20th floor in a big apartment building on the other side of Manhattan, and on the 20th floor, I'm still growing my blueberries and my tomatoes, and I had a great crop of basil this year, and we look forward to it. Oh, I also planted a fig tree. I have high hopes. We'll see. So what are some of the other things that we can learn from the French and from the Italians and other European people? A lot of it I know you're all familiar with, but it's not just what we eat, it's also our whole approach to food. We shouldn't be thinking about food as, oh, I feel guilty if I eat this, and oh, this is sinful if I enjoy it. If you ate something sinful, if you ate something that's unhealthful all the time, if you indulged in that, if you gave it to your children, well, maybe then you're right. But on the other hand, if you try to maintain a healthy diet and eat well as often as you can, you really should be just enjoying what we're eating. And so you've overdone it one day, you just cut back the next day. And that's the whole point of moderation, and I think it's something that is very typical in European countries. It's not a job that we have to do every day. Eating is not a guilt trip. It's something that's pleasurable, or it should be. Recently, Charles and I were in a restaurant, and there was a young couple sitting next to us, and I know you've all seen it, but this was the worst case I'd ever seen. There was a young woman and a young man sitting opposite one another, and she was eating fish. She was eating her dinner, and with her left hand, she was looking at her phone the entire meal, scrolling through the phone, reading her message. They barely spoke to each other. I wondered, did she order fish because she figured she wouldn't have to use a knife? You know, she can manage just with her fork. It was very, very sad to me that he just sat there kind of staring into space. And I thought, she has no idea what she's eating, what it tastes like, is it good? They're not sharing their experiences. It's very, very sad. So that leads to my next point. Of course, we should be eating with no distractions as much as possible. We should sit down and enjoy our meal. And slow down, too. We eat too fast as well, of course. Cook from scratch whenever you can. I really believe in that. I just don't understand why people feel that they have to purchase a jar of tomato sauce. Like Kerstin said, they're full of sugar. They're full of artificial flavors. Why can't we just take some, here's my easy recipe for tomato sauce. Saute some garlic, or if you prefer onion, a little olive oil. Add a pint of cherry tomatoes cut in half, or some other fresh tomato. Skin and all, that's okay. Chunky's good. Lots of fiber, and saute that until it's nice and soft, and eat it with pasta, eat it with fish, whatever you like, and it's absolutely delicious. And I think it takes about 15, 20 minutes at the very most to make a totally delicious, inexpensive, low sodium, no sugar a pasta sauce. So definitely we need to cook from scratch as much as possible. Not everything, but things like tomato sauce are a great example, and I'll talk more about that a little bit further on. Oh, I know, soup is another thing. Why not make fresh soup from scratch? Again, it's so easy. Saute an onion, olive oil. If you want, you could use butter a little bit, but definitely olive oil. Add a package of frozen peas, cover with water, add some seasoning, simmer for 15 minutes, puree it, if you have time, in the blender, and serve it up. You can garnish it with a little olive oil on top, some croutons, a drizzle of cream, whatever suits your fancy. But it's a perfectly wholesome and filling and delicious meal. Italian food doesn't require creativity. All the Italians eat baked fish, pasta with tomato sauces are great, grilled meat, lots of vegetables, salads. You don't have to be a great cook. Just a handful of basic recipes and you'll be serving very nutritious, excuse me, and healthful meals. So another thing that drives me nuts is the packaged bread nowadays. Have you ever read the packaging on bread in the supermarket? There's so many good bakeries in New York. You're probably not going to make your own bread. If you wanted to, that would be great, but I don't have the time. But find a good bakery that makes bread with just a few ingredients and not a lot of preservatives and all those healthful whole grains that we need. Salad dressing, another item. You know what Italian salad dressing is? Maybe one ingredient, olive oil. Often, olive oil, little salt. If you like, add some vinegar, not balsamic vinegar, which I think, I don't know where that idea came from, that Italians eat balsamic vinegar. It's very used in a very limited locations in Italy. I think that it became more popular here in this country and then went back to the old country. But wine vinegar is more typical without all that sugar in it, or if you prefer lemon juice. And that's a good salad dressing. And it doesn't have all of the extra ingredients we don't need. Plain yogurt, just buy plain yogurt, add some fruit. Store-bought mixed fruit yogurts have so much sugar in them, and they're worse for you than eating ice cream. Most important, the 5-ingredient rule. Everybody knows that. If it's got more than 5 ingredients in it, you probably don't want to eat it. That's easy. You don't have to remember the names of all the ingredients you don't want to eat. Just remember, if it's got more than 5, you don't want them. And the other way to look at it is, if it has a lot of ingredients that you cannot pronounce, then you surely don't want to eat it. That's another sign that it's not for you. So we're eating more wholesome food, we're eating healthier food, we're eating more natural food. Eat local and eat seasonal. If you can, eat organic. That's, of course, even better. It's interesting to note that European people spend about 14.7% of their income on food, while we here in the US spend only 7%. And that's an indication of the quality of the food that we are getting. It's really not very good. It's not feasible for most of us to eat our main meal at lunchtime as the Italians do, but we can eat smaller dinners. Try to eat less meat. Have an all-vegetable meal at least once a week. Eat more nuts. Eat more whole grains, beans, lentils. Those are very, very helpful. And again, not the canned stuff. Make them from scratch. It's very easy to do. Eat a lot of salads. Keep the dressing simple. If you're eating pasta or risotto, small amounts, that's okay. And with vegetables, not with a rich, creamy sauce. You know, Sophia Loren, like myself, like my family, is from the Naples area. And she's not eating fettuccine Alfredo when she says that spaghetti made her everything you see. She's eating pasta with fish, with fresh vegetables, with tomatoes. And it's much better for you. And in small amounts. Avoid grazing, snacking between meals. I would say have an espresso, but Kerstin probably wouldn't agree with me. But if you want a treat in the afternoon, some herbal tea is a much better way to go than to drink or to have some kind of a big snack. Serve fruit for dessert, whole fruit, not pureed fruits. Drink water, not juices, with your meals. And maybe it's time for a glass or two of wine. But I'll leave that to Charles to talk about. And remember what the Italians like to say about eating. Eat meno in quantità e più in qualità. Less in quantity and more in quality. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be brief as I can. I've been here a long time. Wine. What is wine? It depends on the culture you come from. If you live in America, like all of us do, we have no tradition of having wine with food. Some people drink wine as a medicine. They hear it's good for my heart, so I'll drink a glass of wine. A friend recently came and said to me, I'm having trouble sleeping. I don't drink wine, but I'll have a glass of wine before I go to sleep. I said, fine. He tried it. What happened? He got indigestion. So I told him, no, you have to do it the Italian way. He said, what way is that? You have to drink the wine with food. Wine goes with food. This is the way the Italians do it. This is the Italian tradition. So every night he would have a glass of wine with his food. Did he sleep with it? Yes. Did he have indigestion? No. So therefore, this is the whole idea. I do not drink wine without food. If you go to Italy, you go to any cafe, you order Prosecco, what do they give you? They give you small sandwiches, pizza, they give you olives, and they give you nuts, because you have to drink and eat something together. I've even been to restaurants in Italy, and they come over and say Vino Bianco or Vino Rosso. You got to make a choice. You have to drink something. You just don't think it's right if you don't drink anything. There's something wrong with you. I've seen people thrown out of a restaurant in Rome, a couple who was asked to leave because they didn't order wine. Why is this a pizza place? You have to have wine. It's just something which, it has to be. Now, this is a tradition, and it's also, wine is good for you. When you sit down at the table in an Italian home or in a restaurant, you drink the wine. It makes the meal last longer. It's better for your digestion. It loosens you up. It makes you feel better. And you stay longer at the table. Now, the Italians make a lot of differences between drinking and eating when you drink. If you want to buy a bottle of wine in Italy, you have to be 18 years old. If you want to go to a pizza place and order beer or wine with your pizza, you only have to be 16 years old. Again, you're drinking with food. The Italians take I looked it all up. I see some people I know, Italians, shaking their heads. I looked it all up. Remember this also, the Italians change their laws every other day, so it may have changed as of 2 days ago. It's like you try to follow when the laws began to class ago, they change every day. You can't follow them. So this is the last thing that I heard. And Italians just agree about, except in the Veneto, one of the areas you have to actually be older, but in other 19 regions, you can do it. So their whole attitude is very different from what we have here. And the Italian family, all the mystery is taken out of wine. So in this country, if you give wine to a 3-year-old, you make it the wine please come. The kid will go to school and says, teacher, I had wine today. They'll send some to the house. Why are you giving your son wine? In Italy, you give your child wine, mix it with water. That's fine. It takes all the mystery. There's less alcoholism in Italy than in much other countries because of this. Because they're drinking wine with your mother and father. Why are you going to go get drunk? It's something I do with my mother and father and the rest of my family. So you just do it. It's just something which is, I think, natural. And I think that makes all the difference. And in a restaurant in Italy, the child can be 14 years old, if you're with the parent or guardian, and have wine. And this makes the whole experience different. So you're not going to sit in the corner and just, drink one glass of wine after another. You drink it over a long period of time. You drink it with your food. It helps you digest. It makes the whole experience much better. And I think that it is a way to be healthier and to live longer when you drink wine. The French have that French paradox, where they eat all kinds of food, they drink the wine, they're not overweight, and they live just as long as everybody else. So sometimes, enjoy your food. And as Michele pointed out, if you drink something or eat something, you don't think it's not good for me, it's going to put on weight, it has this and that. Don't worry about it. Worrying about it is worse than drinking it. Gives you more anxiety and agita, as the Italians say. You don't really need it. And also, we were in Bartolino, and the bus, I don't know what to call them. I hate to say senior citizens, they're not in high school, but let's say from the nursing home, whatever they were, they came, they were elderly, and I talked to them in my Italian, which is like that. Michele is better than me. They were going for the grape cure. They were going to have wine. There was food laid out for them. They would have wine and food. They were going for the grape cure. So again, this is very good for the elderly people. And when they do experience, this country has found out that if you go to an old age home and you give the people wine, it makes them happy, and it stimulates their appetite. So they stopped doing it because it cost too much money. They were eating more and they were drinking more. So there's no reason why they should actually do it. So it doesn't work. But now, I'll be here for 1 minute. But now there are actually nursing homes for the wealthy, which hire named chefs, have a wine list you can choose from in this country now. So they're looking at a different way of looking at things. So when I go to Italy, I always enjoy having those lunches where you just sit there, drink your wine, eat your food, have 4 or 5 different courses, spend the whole afternoon eating it. It's just a wonderful thing to do, and I just love the Italian lifestyle, and I'll leave you with this one thing. If I was a rich man, I would live in Rome. Thank you.